Hey.
Ivy.
Okay, we got it.
I guess they want me
Okay.
to do it. They want me to do it vertical. Fuck.
Yeah, the filmmaker over here. I don't know nothing about that, but let's do a check in. I feel like Mercury retrograde is beating my ass yet again. Um, but I need a check in, so let's do that.
Sure.
How are you?
I'm surviving.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a wild day, but I'm pretty comfy here. I have my string cheese. I have my water bottle. I have the remains of my COVID test from yesterday. That was negative on both counts.
Period. Okay. I hope it's not lagging. You just froze a
I
little
don't think
bit.
it is.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, how am I? I'm okay. My nervous system, I feel like, is all over the place due to like technical difficulties and just like misunderstandings. I feel like just all of the things around Mercury retrograde are like here in the midst right now. But
Yeah.
now I'm glad that I am aware of the cosmos and all the things. I'm grateful for that to be able to regulate more. So yeah, that's a thing. Keep seeing the circle thing. I don't know if it's me or
I don't know
keep
what the
freezing.
circle is.
It's like where it's loading or something. I can see, I hear you, but it's kind of frozen. So I don't know if
Hmm.
that's me
I could
or
turn off I could turn off my video.
okay. Well, we want to see you, but
Okay.
um, I'm just not sure if it's me or you. Anyways, so yes, I'm gonna save this video and hopefully I can upload it to my Substack. I originally, for those who may or may not be watching, I originally um wanted to do this live on my Substack, but I wasn't able to get that figured out. So we're doing this on IG, on Instagram, and we're gonna see how this goes. But I wanted to discuss. I have been talking about Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown on my Substack podcast, which is called, or the publication is called Animism to AI, Reclaiming Ancestral Indigenous Technologies. And it's about basically how we can be remembering and how we can tap into our memory, remembering things that, we feel have probably been stolen from us or taken from us, and just tapping into our bodies and our body's memory, and being able to reclaim some of those ancestral practices, some of the technologies that have kept us alive and kept us in community with one another. And so that is what this is. And I have Charli here, who is who is I would consider her a writer. I would
It's
consider
funny because I
her.
don't consider myself much of a writer at all. I haven't really published any. I mean, I have done sort of like little things on Letterboxd, but I normally consider myself an autistic trans filmmaker working out of
Okay.
Chicago. I
Well,
like to.
let me let you introduce yourself then. Actually, you are
Sure.
frozen for me, so I don't know. Okay. Am I back?
Um. Yeah, I will say this is something I do like about audio podcasts. Is
I
not
know.
only are you able to edit them after the fact in a much more unobtrusive way, but also you don't have to deal with the lag.
I know. Well, let me let you introduce yourself, and because you would introduce yourself way better than I would. So let's do that.
That's completely okay. Yeah, my name is Charlie Christine Marker. I'm an autistic trans filmmaker working out of Chicago. I still don't know really why I'm that qualified to be on this podcast, and not just because I'm a grown up bougie white lady. But
Not a bougie white lady.
I feel like I at least try to be somewhat literate. I have an English degree that from the alma mater that I met Gigi at. Um, I um, we're talking specifically about Adrienne Marie Brown's book, Emergent Strategies, and which I have not actually read in full. I've read two of her other books, and I even sort of name dropped her in a short film that I screened last night at Fast in Chicago. So that was definitely an experience. But yeah, I like to think that I try to emphasize community in my work. I try to emphasize sort of like understanding your body and sort of like this sort of like somatic reason that people experience the world as they do. And hopefully that will play into what we talk about with change.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, and thank you so much for talking to me.
First,
Yeah, we've been going back and forth in our conversations, and just like, and Charlie will constantly say like, I don't know why you want this white lady talk about this, or just positioning in the positions that we. Oh, I see you now! Yay, eating your cheese. All right. Yeah, and just how we move around in the world, and our bodies, and how we are positioned in this world, in this society, and what that means, the intersections of that, also the privileges that we have in each of our bodies, and how we move around. And so yes, thank you so much for being here, and I'm sure we're going to both learn a lot from each other, and I'm sure other folks will learn from this conversation as well. So
thanks.
yes, I've been kind of reading this book. I've been skimming around on my Substack podcast, and but I'm going to, with these lives, I have a couple of other people who are going to be talking. I'm going to be talking to about some of these chapters, so I'm going to be skipping around. Um, I think on my podcast I stopped with the elements of emergent strategy. But today I wanted to talk about intentional adaptation, the chapter titled Intentional Adaptation, How We Change. And for those who actually have the book, um, it is page 67. And I'll just read just what some of the definitions of adaptation and intention, uh, what I'm just gonna say AMB for short, Brown, what
Nice.
she writes as a definition. But adaptation, she says, adaptation, a change in a plant or animal that makes it better able to live in a particular place or situation. The process of changing to fit some purpose or situation. The process of adapting. And then intention is the thing that you plan or do to achieve or aim, an aim or purpose. And so we both have talked about just like this and change, and just like you know what that means, and we talked about also with this book in particular. It seems that like her audience is like basically organizers on the ground, or folks who are political organizers that are or would consider themselves activists. But I think the way that I'm reading it, as I don't really do organizing on the ground like I used to, I think how I'm reading this is even just how I want to, how my body is basically positioned in being in community with just like my neighbors, or just like my friends, and what that means, or even just being in relationship to the earth. And so there's another quote. uh, on page 68, um, where it says, "The only constant is change. There is nature's greatest lesson to me, that change is inevitable and time is unfathomable." And so my question to you, Charli, the first question I want to ask you, and I'll answer too, is what is how do you experience change, or what is your relationship to change?
Yeah, it's weird. I never know. It's such a big question because obviously, as you just said, like the cliche that you hear all your life is that the only constant is change. And
Mm-hmm.
normally, I think about this like as an artist who thinks a lot about like who thinks a lot, especially like about music, about dynamics. I was just revisiting a book I read a decade ago that literally talks about how like so often we assume that like repetition in music is different than like variation, but it really always exists together. And so, and as an autistic person, I feel like I grew up not knowing how to handle change, and I
Mm-hmm.
also felt like, and it wasn't really until I I think near the end of high school that I learned how to really like embrace when change was coming in what could be an uncomfortable way. Like if I was delayed somewhere. Or to sort of like make the most of that. Um and I think I sort of saw it like I guess I already sort of knew how to reframe things. There are so many things I didn't know how to do as a kid, like tie my shoes or like just like do basic motor skills. So when I was asked to do them and couldn't do them well, I feel like I tried to treat them like this is such a pretentious comparison, but I guess I compare it to like John Cage and his idea of like chance operations, like the idea of making the most of this thing that doesn't appear before it. And about a decade ago, I heard about this kind of like British classical music in the 90s that has a sort of mindset in this called the new complexity. I was just starting to be a dancer at this time, so it and doing lots of dance things that were like way beyond my level. And I realized, sorry, I have no clue if I'm being topical with this, but my relationship with change is that I try to go and see the beautiful things in it. And I guess that's the closest thing I have to like a really spiritual perspective on things is being able to find the things that are valuable about it. I think a lot of like even like how I motivate myself with things. If my friends want me to do something and it's hard for me, I try to frame it around like not just making them happy, but seeing a little piece of it that I enjoy and making the most out of that. I think I've become pretty good at it.
Mm, yeah, I feel that. Um, yeah, change is hard. And I guess I'll answer in response to you. I feel like, what was my question? How do I what is my relationship to change? Or I feel like my relationship to change is that I like how she says change is inevitable. And that's something that like I've had. Well, it's like I didn't really have a choice to really um not change. And I think that there are a lot of people that are like that, because
That's
of, yeah, like because of how society is, and how society has seen me and my ancestors. Like there is just, it's always been inevitable. It's always been something that has just like not even basically been a choice whether or not you are going to adapt or not. And so I think that it's just become part of my nature, or I've like tried to integrate it as part of my nature, so that I understand that this is everything is in a cycle basically. Have I always wanted to do that? Have I always wanted to go with the change? Hell no. Like, and I feel like it's hard. Like, it's really hard to really uh for because where change comes, there's also grief, and I think that is a hard thing. I think before it was, I didn't even have time to sit with it. I didn't even have time to be like, oh, like this thing is changing, and maybe I should, sit with the grief of that. It was just kind of like, well, things change, like it's just, you have to
Of
go with
course.
it. And so I think now my relationship to change is that, like, um I do like how she says intentional, where I can be more intentional about the change, and I can see it as like a cycle. I'm thinking about even like menstruation, like for me, where before it was like just something like, ugh, I'm going through all these changes, or like, just like even with like the earth, we talked about this, like the hormonal changes with like climate change and all these things that, are happening that seem like hard because we don't actually know how we don't actually have the container sometimes to like hold space for that, like until I started understanding how my body is and what my body needs during these stages of these, of my cycle. It was like, oh, like now I can have a container where I can actually like provide a where I could provide care for the change instead of like it just happening, and I'm, going through the mood swings and not really taking care of myself in that, if that makes any sense.
Of course.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I guess there's lots of different kinds of change, and I think the idea of acceptance is something that we
Mm,
often are really confused at. I think a couple months ago on Twitter, there were people who talked about the idea. Someone talked about like just obviously like how like AI is a really destructive, violent force in society that should really not exist on any like macro level, and and this person is like, you are like the people who are complaining about horseless carriages, and it's frustrating because on one hand, like it's very clear that they're trying to make fun of people who don't like new technology, something they could do straight as change. But on the other hand, like, yeah, like car culture in the U.S. has caused so much like devastation to so many communities and to so many like just like ways of life. And honestly, is causing so much environmental struggle. And I always feel bad being a bitch to about towards people who like need to use cars, in our current society, but yeah, I think that it does make sense to complain about that too. And the reason I bring that up is because I think there are ways to resist change that are not reactionary. That go and accept where we accept it. Like my last therapist actually specialized in acceptance and change therapy. And at the time I was dealing with lots of really severe dysmorphia stuff to the point of like being hospitalized regularly. So it was important for her to go and tell me that my body was okay the way it was, but it still was like
mm,
that it still is possible to bring it towards what you want.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's funny because like I don't have any of my questions in front of me. You probably got more. You probably are more prepared than I am. But um, I do, something does come to mind when you say that. So like, yeah, when it
Yeah, I think you're cutting out. Yeah, I'm so sorry, I can't hear you.
Like I'm still in my. Hear me now? Yeah. Can you hear me now better?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um. Okay. So I don't know what you did here. I know you could probably hear the dogs barking, but anyways, I was saying that. Speaking of just like body dysmorphia and just like, and I was talking about um how my body changes and like goes through this like menstruation cycle and things, and how basically yeah, like our bodies are going through changes. And so like how have you been able to deal with change as far as like bodily changes, or like even just like how we relate to the earth? Like we talked about this earlier too, um and how like I think a shout out to Black Girl's Guide to Menopause, and how she talks about the earth being menopausal and the hormonal changes in the earth and things like that, which I think is like a really cool um, like way of like talking about just like climate change and things. Um, yeah, in your relation to nature, in your relation to just like the changes that are happening in our society, like what does that mean for your body?
Yeah, that's a good question. I should go and make clear that I'm not like nearly as spiritual a person as you. Not just because I'm atheist, but I'm just like not naturally that like grounded to like non like to a non like material, or like I could think of things philosophically, but normally I feel like I don't know. My dad growing up called himself the great indoorsman, and I still sort of have a lot of that. Even though I do have learned to truly love nature, and it's weird because obviously I currently live in the city of Chicago, and I one of my favorite things is finding little pieces of nature amidst like all the man-made um like modernity, for lack of a better word. And like to see like a spider web that is like right in the corner of like a like the back of a church, and seeing it like, and then finding another one that's literally like behind the window. And so much of my filmmaking is about capturing little things like that and showing that that sense of nature is still there. Um, but in terms of like macro things like climate change, I really have no clue other than to just like practice whatever kind of responsibility I can, which is not something that I really like consider myself to be that great at either. Um, but I don't know.
Yeah. And so how do you feel like I guess like for me, I feel like I've been able to like build this relationship with um yeah, we talk about like spiritual practices and how like um we go like, I know for me like my body is very in tune with like the cycles of nature, and how yeah, how the cycles of nature basically help me tap back into my body. um and so like what what have been some, I guess, like somatic like uh understandings of like your own body, and how it's changed, and what has helped ground you and just like the change as far as like embodiment.
That's a good question. I do think I don't think that they're really connected necessarily to nature for the most part. I like going on walks, and that help me be able to like feel alive in the world when I'm really depressed. In fact, one of my probably most irrational soapboxes is that part of what I don't like about gym culture isn't just like the fat phobia and like toxic masculinity, but also like the way that it feels just wrong for us to like have to do these sorts of things inside these boxes when there's so much beautiful things that we can move through in the world. But because we've caused this destruction, we force ourselves to do that. So, yeah, I've always liked walking places and interacting with things. And sometimes, normally when I walk, I'm doing these little poses. Or like if I'm passing by a car on a street, I will go and like wave like that. And so I'll do lots of little things like that. Um, I think I definitely think that those things have helped me a lot to remember my womanhood. Um, and obviously, like even in terms of like interacting with all sorts of life. I remember at my last apartment, in Old Town, there was this crow that lived in the little like park area, and I would say hi to it on my way over to do things every day. And she was really one of my favorite people in the world.
Respond, this is on page 69. Many of us respond to change with fear or see it as a crisis. It says some of us anticipate change with an almost titillating sense of stress. We spend precious time thinking about what has changed that we didn't choose or can't control, and or thinking ahead of future stress. How do you feel like change affects like even just like your everyday life? I know like today I was really I was really stressed. Like I'm in my luteal phase, so like I'm my hormones are everywhere, and I'm also like or out of balance really, and I'm also like trying to prepare for this talk with you, and then also it's just like stressed around the house, and it's just like this daily routine, and like my partner it took off today, and that really messed up my whole routine. Like the change of that just like felt like it just threw everything off. How do you feel like change affects like even just like the mundane for you?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've become pretty good at. I know that you got annoyed when I brought this up a few days ago, but this quote that I heard a decade ago, where someone said there's something sexy about not having an opinion about something.
Oh no,
And
it was just a little bit, just a little bit triggering, but in a funny way.
yeah, but I think what I like about it is simply related to what you just said, where there is something where so often we get become so annoyed at irrational things that don't matter. And
Yeah.
I feel like so much of like how I can function even in the basic ways I do is to just like consciously tell myself like these things aren't really my thing, but I don't need to have a thought critically about them. I could just like let it exist and go on with my day.
Mm. Mhm.
And so when other things happen, I will admit that like I think about like me being obsessively punctual to things, which definitely has historically done me just as much harm as good, if not more. But I think it does when I have more time to show up to things. I do am able to take into account when something goes wrong, and be able to not freak out because I know that I have things to make sure that things are okay. And I guess you could call that a sort of self care. I remember a couple years ago I was working on a documentary with another trans filmmaker with severe OCD, and I knew that would cause lots of production issues because as we would have to like walk 6 miles a day with me recording her, and we'd have to like go to restaurant after restaurant trying to find somewhere she could have food, and she would be like say that it was too dirty there, and I would have to tolerate that. But I just told myself that if I just planned around it, it wouldn't be a big deal, and I would be able to spend time with her. So it's just like keeping those things in mind, and so that when these things happen, you know how to do it. And obviously, a lot of that is just picking your battles. Like if your partner went and like regularly made these sorts of changes, you could talk to them about it, and or even if you don't bring it up to them, you could just like know in advance like how that works, and I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I know like everyday routine is like in Thailand because things aren't so like westernized, and like where westernized is very like schedule oriented, like it's very like get up, go to work, yada yada yada, like it's just very like do. Being here, it was definitely like a culture shock, especially at first where things just happen. Like it's just like you don't know what's gonna happen, and it's just like I think there was like a saying that everybody said where it was just like that's the Thai way, basically, where you know anything can happen in Thailand or something like that. It is just like
Yeah,
literally you just never know.
have you ever seen anything by the filmmaker, the Thai filmmaker, Apichatpong Weerasethakul?
Mm-mm. Put
Yeah,
me on.
yeah, he's an internet. He's like probably the most like internationally known Thai filmmaker,
Mm.
and
Okay.
yeah, and he's known to make these like very slow, peaceful films that almost like have this like dreamlike state. He had a film that really influenced me a lot a few years ago called Memoria, that where they decided that because they wanted to keep this sort of like temporal focus on like being present with the
Mm.
space around you, they decided to never release it on video and just like have it be something you could only go to places to see.
Mm.
And it yeah, there's there's a moment in one of his movies. I won't say which one, so it doesn't spoil it. But there's a moment where someone just like lies down after being really tired after a long day, and it keeps going for like 10 minutes, and you don't know if, as the sun is shining and you hear these nature sounds, whether that person died, and you're just like watching a snuff film or something, and then after like 10 minutes, they suddenly wake up again and you see it in the same take. And it truly is extraordinary. And I feel like that sort of art about that sort of like free temporality, being freed aesthetically from Western ideas of time, has influenced me a lot, both as an artist and a human being. Do I think that you're lagging?